These new silent switches from Haimu are revolutionary. Ever since the original Cherry MX Black came out in 1984, there hasn't been a whole lot of innovation in the Cherry MX design. Back in 2016, Cherry came out with their line of silent switches, which uses rubber dampeners in the stem to quiet the upstroke. Gateron silent switches released shortly after, and every silent switch that's been released since uses a similar principle of rubber dampeners on various parts of the switch to reduce the sound of the collision between the stem and the housings. While it's a great idea in theory, the traditional silent switch has a few major drawbacks. First, the rubber dampener. The dampener does a great job of quieting the sounds of plastic on plastic, but it comes at the cost of Typefeel. The moment you try a silent switch, it's a pretty underwhelming, mushy experience. Also, you have to be really careful with lubing silent switches. If lube gets on the rubber dampener, it can lead to a kind of squeegee effect that makes the switch stick. Sticky and mushy might be how I like my oatmeal, but it has no place describing a mechanical keyboard, along with creamy, clocky, and, well, let's stop there before I start some synesthetic flame wars. Enter the Haimu. Haimu is pretty much unknown to the Western mechanical keyboard market, but they've worked with Velocifier since they started sometime in 2020 by an ex-Kale engineer who apparently engineered the mold for the one and only Gazzew Bobagum U4T. Since Haimu started, they've been an OEM manufacturing switches for Everglide, WK Studios, and Epomaker. But today we're talking about their new silent switches. Right after, you silently press the like button. So today we're taking a look at both the Whisper Silent Tactile and the Hearbeat Silent Linear because they share the same innovative design. In place of rubber dampeners, the stem has small relief cuts at both the bottom housing contact point and at the top of the stem slider, where the main collision with the top housing occurs. As the stem makes contact with the housing, the stem itself acts as a dampener that absorbs the sound of the impact. And because there's no rubber or other material to act as a dampener, the switch feels like a normal, unsilenced MX switch. It's uncanny because my fingers expect to hear audible feedback as I'm typing, but the switches are dead silent on the downstroke. Due to the design, the return sound is louder than the bottom out because the dampener on the top of the stem is a lot smaller than the one affecting the downstroke. But overall, these switches retain smoothness and don't sacrifice Typefeel for acoustics, which is a huge step forward in MX silencing tech. Here's a quick sound test of both the linears and the tactiles. Now these switches have a full nylon housing with a palm stem, so they aren't going to be quite as smooth as a polycarbonate or umwhoop housing. I tried swapping the stem from the Hearbeat Linear into a C3 equals tangerine housing, and while it is significantly quieter than the stock Tangy, it's not nearly as quiet as the stock Hearbeat switch. Here's a quick example of the different switches. I don't know what other wizardry Haimu has incorporated into their housing design to make the switch so quiet, but I did notice these two small holes on the bottom housing. Now, holes in the housing aren't anything new. The Gateron CAP switches have a hole in the stem pole receptacle, and they aren't necessarily any quieter than any other switch. So the holes got me thinking, and I drilled similar holes in the bottom of a CAP switch to see what effect, if any, it had on the switch silence, and the result was pretty shocking. There was a significant reduction in sound from the holes in the bottom housing, and it's pretty fascinating because I never thought two small holes could affect the sound in such a huge way. If you're feeling brave, you could drill holes in the bottom housings of your own switches, but let's be real. You don't buy silent switches unless you need silence, and the silence in these new Haimu switches is a total package, from the stem design to the housings themselves. There was one concern I had about the stem design. After all, the silencing mechanism uses small pieces of plastic, but I've broken the switches for over 500,000 actuations, and there was no failure in the switches. Take a listen along with a comparison with some other popular silent switches. To be honest, if you've heard one silent switch, you've pretty much heard them all. The new Haimu shine in how they feel. The Whisper Tactile in particular has a P bump with no pre-travel and what feels like 2 mm of post-travel. I describe the bump as mid-sized, and as the silencing part of the stem compresses, the switch starts to feel a little cushioned. They are factory lubed with what appears to be 205G0 on just the stem sliders. And I'm happy that more companies like Haimu and Mayroon are lubing their switches with a thicker lube that doesn't require lubing over. As for filming the switches, I found that it makes them louder and introduces a bit of leaf noise, so I wouldn't recommend it. Now it's time for the good, the bad, and the ugly. First, the good. These switches are true innovation in the Cherry MX design, and I'm blown away by the result. Oh, and did I mention that they're only 44 cents per switch? They're cheaper and objectively better than just about every other silent switch on the market. However, there's a big but that I need to warn you about. If you're planning on buying these switches for some freaking switching of your own, just know that the housings won't be too useful. The stem pole is thinner on the Haimus than the Cherry MX spec, maybe to make room for the holes in the bottom housing. As a result, putting a Cherry MX black stem created an extremely short travel and kind of an odd typing experience. On the other hand, the Gateron yellow stem didn't have the same issue. So you'll have to evaluate on a case-by-case basis if your leftover stems will fit the Haimu housing without that issue. As for the ugly, there was nothing to not like about these switches. I'd like to see future revisions with different housing materials to help with smoothness, and I might drill some holes in some polycarbonate bottom housings to see if they're equally silent. Overall, if you're looking for a silent switch, the Haimu Silents are going to be better than anything else on the market at a cheaper price. Check out some other switch reviews here. I'm MakerMods, and I'll catch you in the next video.